This film is about community engagement as the context, or one of the part of the context for effective community capacity building, and it makes the link between the two and also argues the case for agencies and public sector organisations needing to look at their own capacity to engage effectively. In case you ever need to justify it with your bosses and authorities, this is a list of good solid reasons why community engagement can bring benefits to public services. Fairly widely known list of ideas there. I won't go through them all, I assume you're familiar, but these are kind of research-based ways of arguing really for effective community engagement. Benefits for public services, but obviously we're talking about communities benefiting as well. Here's a range of methods in case you need some ideas. I imagine you're trying out all these sorts of things, from the traditional of public meetings, panels and focus groups and that type of thing, right through to World Cafe technique and open space. I don't know if you're familiar with these, not so new nowadays. They have their place, they can be very useful, they can be overused as well. Right through to using drama to get feedback, some really interesting work. And when I was in a team doing stuff on looking at the future of the district, we built a wishing well, literally like theatrical prop, you know, big wishing well, and took it around community centres for people to, on a card, put their wish for the district for the future. And it really caught on. People would phone up every week, say, can we have your wishing well? You know, can you bring it over? So we had to stick this thing in a car every Friday and take it around to another centre. But ideas like that, I'm all for creative approaches, you know, I think, but choosing really carefully. So that's the sort of thing, I'm sure you're involved in lots of those. But this is what I hear, and I expect you hear this sort of thing. It wasn't really a consultation. It had all been decided beforehand in the corridors of power. I didn't feel very confident about speaking. It was all rather formal. We had a good session, but then heard nothing more about it, and what a shame that is. You build up a bit of goodwill, you get people there, and then, you know, they don't hear for months, and they, you know, you lose the enthusiasm for it. Someone was there to represent us, but seemed out of touch, and that can happen too. People who start as a community representative, as a bit of a fighter or activist in an area, then gets involved in, you know, the tenants committee or the federation, and the federation, then they're on the subcommittee and the scrutiny and all this, and you know, people can sometimes lose their base camp, their sort of links with the grassroots, and you know, that can be a real loss. And this one as well, officers and councillors need to build their capacity to engage with communities, not just the community side of it. So that's an important theme. I want to look at that in the light of the ladder of participation. I expect you're familiar with this. 5 levels, from informing right through to supporting local action. Each level can mean many different things, like level 2, consultation. That rung of the ladder itself could involve a whole variety of forms of consultation. Asking about people's needs is different from identifying causes and barriers to participation or to sorting out other problems. Getting ideas for improvements is different from actually consulting about needs. It's more solution-based. Floating new ideas is different from coming with a firm proposal. So even within that term consult on level 2, there's a whole range of options as to what that can mean. I suppose a key point about this is that, yes, higher up the ladder you go, the more generally it takes in terms of skills, time and resources. And I don't just mean in terms of community participants, for ourselves as well. I think the higher up the ladder you go, the more demanding it is for us to use that as a form of engagement. It's an important thing to consider in terms of planning what we're doing. I've worked with some officers in local authorities who, looking at the ladder, maybe for them the first time, who say, well, I wish I'd seen this before, because I think we were confused about what we were doing. Really all we could do was consult in a fairly basic way, and what we thought we could do was work jointly, and we didn't have the time to do that. All we should have said is we can consult and that's it, you know, because of the timetable or whatever. So you know, that's an important side of it. The person who devised all this, David Wilcox, his line was, don't assume you always have to go up the ladder for more empowerment. Empowerment can happen at most rungs. I'm not sure about the bottom one, which is about just being informed. But, you know, don't assume empowerment is only at the top one, for example, but there's levels of empowerment throughout the ladder. And it's not a kind of, we must always aim to climb up it. Some people have taken the ladder sideways because they don't like the idea of a ladder, a hierarchy. They just see it as a number of ways of getting involved. You know, this is a menu, it's not an obligation to always be moving up the ladder in that way. Key thing for me though is for it to be effective, it needs people in public services to equally play their part in it. Because if people are coming forward from community groups who are more confident, more articulate, better informed, want to have a say, want to get involved in community action and activities and so on, but they hit a ceiling, they hit the bureaucracy, they hit closed doors, they hit decisions being made in the corridors of power in the town hall or whatever, then we're not going to get very far with this. It needs to be a partnership approach really to capacity building, where public agencies, public service organisations are equally thinking about how they're organised and how their own skills and their abilities to work jointly with communities. I don't know if that's a big revelation for yourselves, but certainly I was involved in thinking about the community side of it for some time, and then increasingly through my experience with groups I thought, well, this has got to be a partnership approach basically. It's got to be local authorities and other public agencies really taking it seriously if they want to have an impact in and with communities. It's an internal thing for them as much as it is community based, and that leads to this interesting twist. You could say, as well as community capacity building, what if we twisted that round and we had agency capacity building, learning, resources, organisational change that increases the ability of public sector organisations to engage with communities effectively. So I actually think it needs to be in parallel. It needs the two together, community capacity building and agency capacity building, and that's the only way it's going to work. That way we're working together in solidarity. It's not this patronising thing of, well, we're all sorted and you've got to skill up. You know, we're all in this together. That's my approach. I personally get involved in all sorts of learning and change things. You know, I've had my own mentor for the last year, believe it or not. That's been really important to me. You know, there's a lot to learn, and I really want to learn a lot from groups and so on. So I think it's really about all of us being open to that, and that way it's more like working in solidarity with people in communities, that we're all out to build our strengths in different ways.
Through Community Learning Development in Falkirk, we've been carrying out community profile door-to-door surveys in the area. This is taking up a huge amount of our time and resources, but the benefits have been huge because you've actually been working with the local people and their lived experiences and issues. So I think the main barrier is the people power needed to engage with the communities and sustain that, keep the engagement going. So I think that was the main barrier.
I think sometimes it's about thinking out of the box and using, for example, IT more. And on the community that I work, we're now looking at how we use Facebook, Twitter to get in touch with younger sectors of the community. I also think we need to use our imagination in terms of activities that are going to attract people in to then engage with them at an appropriate level.
What changes could public sector organisations make to work more effectively with communities?